A 2,000-year-old secret hid in plain sight on these Egyptian paintings, but archaeologists finally reveal it. Have you ever looked at a painting or a mural and been curious to know the history behind it? Well, for any art lover, it would always draw attention or interest, as art comes in different shapes and forms. If you look around, you'll see several works of art just out in the street. It's always something interesting to learn about how they came about. Well, these Egyptian paintings have been there for years, but recently scientists have discovered something remarkable about them that's left everybody open-mouthed. There were a few archaeologists who'd been working in Egypt. These researchers soon discovered an amazing collection of mummy portraits in 1899. All these portraits looked extremely similar to each other, and these artworks are allegedly linked to the mummified remains. These paintings were done the time the Romans held sway in Egypt about 2,000 years ago. Some re-evaluation. It was such a surprising find because the archaeologists did not expect to find so many of them. The portraits had disappeared as they were directly kept in storage ever since they'd been discovered. But in the year 2015, scientists and conservators decided to hold a re-evaluation of these paintings. What they were led to discover completely left them shocked. Fayum portraits. These paintings that have been around were indeed enchanting to look at. They were all done so clean and crisp. Also, these portraits have been painted on wood panels and were also called Fayum portraits. These were alleged representations of people who had passed away. Each painting was said to be of the mummified person that died. A common practice. Looking at these paintings, you would clearly see that they're done masterfully. The panels were also an addition to the mummified bodies and kept along with the bindings. These were also placed over the face of the deceased. The practice was something of the Roman Empire era, which also included Egypt. It was quite a common practice during the time. A love story. This was clearly not a work of the Egyptians, as we must have all seen the style of paintings they follow. The Romans incorporated Egypt as an addition to their empire in 30 BC. Following the victory over his enemy, Mark Antony, Octavian, later Emperor Augustus, took over Egypt from the pharaoh of the day, who was Cleopatra. A change came. It was also a strange and complex relationship because there were also a love affair involved. She and Mark Antony were also lovers. And after they began their relationship, there was a huge change. What was known as the Ptolemaic kingdom now became a possession of Rome. And after this happened, there was a tangible change in how Egypt functioned. Egypt's stance. We must have all read from our history books that Egypt was a land that was sophisticated and a land high above the rest. So it was no surprise that the Roman province of Egypt was a prized possession for them. Even when the Romans conquered it, the country had already held a sophisticated economy and culture. It had already blossomed as a society. Affluent lands. There was a catch though. Italy was wealthier than Egypt, so that made Egypt become a key supplier of grain for the Romans. But even so, there was no huge gap as such economically because Egypt was not a backward country in general. The Egyptian port and capital of Alexandria were just a little smaller than Rome itself in size and significance. Where is Fayum? The practice of making portraits was something that was fairly common during that time. There were roughly 900 mummy portraits kept in the collection all over the world. Majority of these had actually been discovered at the mass burial ground at Fayum. Where is it? It's located about 60 miles southwest of Cairo, in case you'd like to drop a visit. Still vivid. Even though these paintings have been kept in storage for years, you could say they're still in mint condition. It's all due to Egypt's high temperatures and lack of humidity. Because of the ideal weather, the depictions are surprisingly well preserved. If you take a look at them, you can still see the colors are vivid. There are no signs of aging like other cases where the paintings fade. Cartonnage. After some research was done, the researchers soon found out some information regarding the painting found in Fayum. The Roman tradition of mummy paintings in Egypt was actually something practices in early Egypt called the practice of cartonnage. It's basically a technique of painting onto the casket or coffin where the mummy's been placed. The process. So what does this amazing practice entail anyway? Well, to do this, one must keep layers of papyrus or linen that have been covered in the plaster where a likeness would usually be painted onto them. This would create an effect that somehow functions as a death mask. These paintings held quite the role because they were used to identify the mummy placed beside it. Pietro della Valle. Although the Egyptians had been practitioners of painting mummies, especially the royal lineage, this ritual was fairly different from the traditional step. This was undoubtedly a Roman introduction, although there was also some effect of previous Egyptian practices. Some of the examples of mummy art have been discovered in the modern era by an Italian, Pietro della Valle, back in 1615. A pioneer. Before Pietro della Valle, there were no records of mummies being found ever. He discovered these mummy paintings at the Saqqara, Memphis archaeological site. After that, he brought some with him all the way to Europe, and where they're still kept at the Albertinum Museum in Dresden, Germany. If you happen to be in the area, they're still exhibited. All the way to Europe. Like we'd mentioned earlier, there have been so many records of Egyptian paintings being discovered, and it was not until the beginning of the 1800s that there were additional discoveries. These new discoveries soon found their way back into some European collections. It's quite amazing if you think about how recent the uncovering of these paintings happened. More of them. And also the paintings' final destinations would become the British Museum in London. There are some paintings that have been placed in the Louvre in Paris as well. Then there was yet another hiatus regarding the discovery of mummy portraits all over the world. Who knows, there could be some more of them waiting to be discovered. So what did they find after a closer inspection? A closer look. And so after these paintings were discovered, there was no extensive study as such placed on them. There were bound to be researchers who wished to take a closer look to decipher what these paintings meant. And so naturally, by the late 19th century, serious archaeologists such as Brit Flinders Petrie were soon drawn to take a closer look at these mummy portraits. A crowd attraction. And after putting in work and effort, Petrie finally discovered 81 mummy portraits in a Roman necropolis in Hawara in 1887. He'd been working profusely to hopefully dig up something new and exciting regarding these Egyptian portraits. His discoveries have been placed in London, and the works obviously attracted a lot of attention. A crowd attraction, actually. Another exploration. There was yet another work done by a set of archaeologists that aimed to discover more. This archaeological expedition actually ran from December 1899 to April 1900. The work was done by Tebtunis, uncovering 11 more mummy portraits, plus 4-panel painting fragments. It was indeed a great success, as they'd managed to dig up so many new items. With modern technology. So after these were discovered, it led to an interest that sparked in some researchers. And so these 15 pieces that the scientists have been studying recently eventually led to a surprising detail that everyone had missed for so long. With so much of technology advancement happening in recent past, what was uncovered led to new information regarding these discoveries. The two guys. After spending so many days searching for these well-hidden artifacts, the team of researchers could finally locate 15 pieces. These new discoveries were made by 2 British archaeologists. So who were they? Bernard Grenfell and Arthur Hunt managed to dig up these paintings after working for weeks. The pair became popular for the discovery of the Oxyrhynchus Papyri. From a heap of trash. So what did they manage to uncover? If you've not heard of the Oxyrhynchus Papyri, these are a pile of documents that have been dated to have originated from the 3rd century BC. They were produced during the Roman-Egyptian period and were discovered among an ancient trash heap. The documents ranged from private letters to horoscopes. Life-changing paintings. For a long while, the 2 guys have been looking all over to hopefully locate anything worth digging. The 2 guys were finally able to uncover the paintings at a site called Tebtunis. And today, this site has been occupied by a modern town known as El Bragat. They did not have too much expectation, but soon dug up the paintings that literally changed their lives. More about the location. This place is located in Egypt's Fayum region. There are actually so many mummy portraits that have been uncovered in the past years in this place. However, these have all been dared to be from the ancient Roman Egyptian burials. The panels and mummy portraits are now safely placed at the Hearst Museum at the University of California, Berkeley. First-timers. These paintings indeed led to a huge attraction and attention when they were first unearthed. But on the topic of research, no one had actually been interested in looking into them closely. And so, after over 100 years since the panels were discovered, the time finally came for someone to do an in-depth study. It would be the first time these paintings would undergo scientific evaluation. Who were they? So, who were these people who finally decided to take a closer inspection of these paintings? The team of scientists and conservators who had been conducting this work were from Northwestern University and the Phoebe A. Hearst Museum of Anthropology. The main objective of the study was to understand the techniques and materials that had been used from these paintings. No harm, please. It was a huge task to try and uncover what the paintings were composed of. The team had to spend over 2 years in order to study the artworks using non-invasive methods. They needed to get their information without having to worry about any potential damages. Since there were priceless objects, there was a need for an effective method that would not hamper anything. The investigation technique. So what could these researchers possibly use to learn more about these paintings if they couldn't risk any harm? Well, the investigation tools they'd been used comprised of 2 types of X-ray technology: diffraction and fluorescence. This led to quite the revelation, as they were finally able to clarify the painting techniques and the materials used. What did they find? After they could finally take a closer look at the details of the paintings, the researchers would soon discover something quite intriguing. There was a particular finding that left the researchers puzzled at first. It appears that out of 6 of these 15 paintings' background layer had blue pigment. It was the detail that these researchers did not expect to discover. On the university website, one of the research from Northwestern's Mark Walton had something interesting to reveal while speaking about the paintings. This research associate professor of materials science and engineering had announced the importance of the finding on the university's website. What he wrote was something that left everyone speechless, as they had not expected this discovery at all. Unprecedented. What the researcher revealed was something that the world had never heard of before. The discovery changes our understanding of how this particular pigment was used by artists in the 2nd century AD. I suspect we'll start to find unusual uses of this colorant in a lot of different works of art, such as wall paintings and sculpture, claims expert Walton. An odd color. Walton also stated that the paintings during the classical era mostly made use of only red, yellow, black, and white. When you look at the Teptunis portraits we studied, that's all you see, those 4 colors, Walton further stated. But when we started doing our analysis, all of a sudden we started to see strange occurrences of this blue pigment, which luminesces. Further explanation. A member of the Hearst Museum's conservators, Jane L. Williams, soon spoke about the reason why the artists might have used blue pigment. We see how these artists manipulated a small palette of pigments, including this unusual use of Egyptian blue, to create a much broader spectrum of hues. Williams explained on the topic of this strange revelation. Something more. The work that they put out helped them immensely, as they wanted to crack down the painting techniques adopted in these panels. They were able to prove the remarkable international trading network that hid behind the artist's work. Our materials analysis provides a fresh and rich archaeological context for the Teptunis portraits, reflecting the international perspective of these ancient Egyptians, Walton added. For example, Walton further explained, we found that the iron earth pigments, which most likely came from Chios in Greece, the red lead from Spain, and the wood substrate on which the portraits are painted came from Central Europe. The artists that painted these masterpieces were not just using sophisticated techniques to create subtle hues. The supply chain during their time fall at par with what is used even today.